So at what point does a company decide that it's done enough for the community? At what should there be a time limit of what a company can do for a community where it's, you know, where it has its offices in, or should there just something that, you know, that just continues over time and there's no time frame as to when it should stop?
I think that, you know, putting a time frame to it should also make us look at, should organizations have a time frame to when they should stop making profit or doing business? You know, so I think the argument really is that there's been this massive shift in paradigm in the business world. You know, we saw the clash of Enron of this world and businesses that people never thought could collapse, that they had been built into such gargantuan monstrosities that even if the world came to an end, they would still be there. And what happened? We saw these companies crash to the ground because of issues of corporate governance and the conscience of the business. People ran this thing, made so much profit, cut short, had all sorts of internal circuit breaking that was so profit oriented and didn't care about.
So for companies like that, now how does this impact on the society? Because, for instance, we have a company whose CSR is to provide water, like you said, or to provide roads or books, as the case may be, or help to rebuild some dilapidated infrastructure. What happens when such a company collapses? Well,
if such a company collapses, it collapsed because there wasn't transparency. Because you see, one of the corporate social responsibility in itself has a good relations with corporate governance. And when you talk about corporate governance, you're talking about the conscience of business itself. How do we, beyond all this beauty that we project, beyond all the success and the razzmatazz, you know, that are become like our accompaniment, what is inside us as a business? Who are we? What are our value system? What do we stand for? You know, and how does all these things that we stand for interface with the expectations of society? That's where the question is. Because if you don't have that, you find out that most of what you have are glamorous companies just making profit and not really putting back anything to society. Then connecting that back, you find one thing, that in the end, the value of every company at the end of the day actually connects to the conscience of the company. And the conscience of this company eventually goes on to tell the health of our business sector. Now, if you look at this example I was trying to give you earlier, you find out that, you know, I remember when we had these issues of some banks collapsing on a global level, we had a central bank governor, and he came out at a press conference and he said that, you know, whatever was happening on the global market cannot affect the Nigerian economy, that the Nigerian economy was so sound. But you and I know that 7 months later, 4 or 5 Nigerian banks went down and have never recovered till today. What are the issues? And when the searchlight was zoomed on these companies, there was a lot of insider trading, you know, a lot of abuses of processes, you know. Now the question is that even though these companies had CSR that they were doing at the time, what is real CSR? If you look back now, you probably define that as a window dressing or some process of window dressing, because you cannot be doing CSR to look good outside when your essence, your core as a company has no credibility and there are no processes, I mean your processes, internal processes are not transparent.
But you notice that a lot of companies that do almost similar CSR programs, can such companies actually come together and do these things together so that in the eventuality when one company isn't functioning anymore, the other company can carry on?
It's possible, because you see on a global level also, I mean, Microsoft is partnering with everybody to fight hunger and poverty in Africa. You know, what companies have also tried to do over the years that hasn't been right is that they wanted to own the problem. But you see, you can own the problem because you can't solve all the problem. You know, because at some point they felt, oh, we want to be better known, you know, for being the ones. Yeah, you can be known for being the one who's driving an initiative. But the best way to have impact is to get other organizations involved. Let me give you an example. Recently, I know there was a partnership between Coca-Cola and Guinness. It had to do with water. And they had some international organizations also joining them. And it was really interesting because, you see, for these two companies, their major resource is water. So if groundwater in the entire world, drinkable water, has dried up to we're at a point where we have just 3% as we speak of drinking water, 3% of water that's available being drinkable. And this company's future depends on the availability of fresh drinking water. It just makes sense that even though they are in different markets, that they both come together to deal with the issues of how to provide good drinking water, for community, and for the fact that they also can use it as a resource. So I think going into the future, partnership of that level, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in environment. I mean, which company will come, for example, and tell you that they can deal with all the issues of the ozone depletion by themselves? Nobody can. But can 10 companies come and sign an understanding or a memorandum of understanding or an undertaking and say, you know what, from this moment on, we're going to look at our CO2 emission, make sure we conserve energy, make sure we use more environment-friendly materials that are biodegradable, so that the impacts on, if people come together on such an initiative, it will really drive the process of development even more.
Well, there's this other debate that I actually found very funny when I read about it, that CSR could influence an employee's commitments. What are actually your thoughts on this?
Yeah, these days, I think that's very, very pertinent also. Because, nowadays, people are not just looking for work. People are looking to work in companies that they can be proud to be part of. It might interest you to note that in a recent research, it showed that, I think this research was carried out in the UK, it showed that, about 70% of fresh graduates into the labor market picked the companies that they were going to work with based on how they perceived these companies to function, or how they related with the society based on their CSR programs. So it means that these companies want to work in, this graduate or these potential employees wanted to work in companies that, made them feel good, make them feel proud to be part of the companies. So it does happen that, CSR, having a proper CSR program or process or processes helps put your company in that light where people see you at a company, at a place to want to work, to work in.
But the company is actually obligated to, to turn in reports as to how they've carried out their CSR programs for the year.
Yeah, you see, that's why I was saying earlier that, any organization that dismisses or disregards CSR at this point, in 2013 and going forward into the future, is doing so at its own peril. Across the world, in South Africa, for example, you don't submit only your financial report anymore. You submit your CSR or sustainability report alongside it. And that is, in Nigeria right now, as I speak to you, we're moving towards that. Because I know when the bank, for example, the banking sector came and put together this sustainable banking principles a year or two ago, I think the agreement was that by December of 2013, companies were going to have to start to submit their sustainability report. So it's not something people should sweep under the carpet anymore. It has actually become a very big economy. Now, how do I say that? In 2006, when we started to do research on CSR in Nigeria, for example, Nigeria's 100 leading companies, right, spent approximately about 600 million on CSR. But last year, we had about 90 of the 100 leading companies give us materials to see how much they spend. And we verified these sources because we work with the FIRS and they enter these figures for real. And you find out that, those companies, the figures had risen close to 22 or 23 billion spent over a reporting period on CSR. Now, this is the problem. Now, we have gotten quite a lot of companies to buy into the concept of CSR. Now, the CEOs are getting to understand that they need to functionally and effectively get their companies to understand the concept of CSR and also practice it. But we have the next problem now, which, because it's a new body in the industry, where we don't have the level of expertise required by the people who oversee this project to invest them in programs and be able to deliver impact on them, which I believe by the time we sort out, because we are going through, the industry is going through a phase of development, by the time we sort out, we will have Nigeria, perhaps in Africa, leading the way in not just spending CSR, but the impact on the initiatives across the continent.
You keep mentioning the banking sector. Is that the only sector of the economy that has actually put forward a lot of CSR programs and initiatives?
Yeah, I think if you look at CSR in Nigeria and break them into sectors, you probably have the oil and gas sector, you have the telecom sector, and you have the banking sector, and you have the manufacturing sector, and you have the small and medium scale industry sector, and you might, if you go further down, you find the category of the social entrepreneurs, people who get involved in business ideas just to solve, you could break them down like that. Now, if we look cursively, one of the things you will find is that over the last 5 years, one thing that has been constant is that approximately between 55 to 60% of the entire CSR spend, talking of in terms of cash volumes invested in programs, have come from the oil and gas sector.
Well, that's a no-brainer because they have a lot of money.
Yeah, even though it hasn't really solved the problems for them, and you can understand why, because of the nature of the business. Then I think the other sector that it comes next in rank to the oil and gas sector is the telecom. It's been the investment in corporate social responsibility has been massive, and one of the things you also notice that innovation, quite a lot of innovation has come from telecom investment, and then of course you have after them the banking sector, then followed by the manufacturing sector of the economy in terms of how much they spent on CSR over the past few years.
Now, what is the future of CSR in Nigeria? Based on everything that you've just talked about this morning, will it remain a distinct function for most corporate organizations, or will it evolve to something bigger?
It has already evolved to something bigger, or let me say, it has already evolved to something big, and it has the potential to evolve into something much more massive that can become an engine that drives development and growth, and also provide a platform, which is the key thing right now, the platform for all these companies to drive innovation and solve all the problems innovatively, and give them also an opportunity, because most of them are engaging with these factors with all their brains open, and they're doing their research and development processes are quite open. And you would have a situation where, I feel that even in the future, there are going to be products that they never thought about that they are going to come up with, based on the CSR platform. There's a dairy, a company that produces milk, and recently it was really interesting. I don't want to mention names, but I found it really interesting that recently they went into, when they did the research work and found out that, one of the reasons why mothers die at birth is because of the lack of certain nutrients that they ought to have had at childbirth, or before childbirth, or at the process during their pregnancy. And they went into producing dairy products that these mothers can take, to prepare them for that period, to nourish themselves and nourish so it provides that's what I mean. People are beginning to connect on different levels, and I think it provides great opportunity and promise for growth in the economy and the impact of the activities on developing our society.
Well, thank you so much, Ken, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning on the program. It's been quite insightful. Well, this conversation will continue.
Thank you very much.
Well, we've been talking about corporate social responsibility and how this concept can actually help to transform the economy. And I've been speaking with PR consultant Ken Egbas, who happens also to be a managing partner at True Contact.